3 things about the Mexican Revolution's true beginning that everyone gets wrong. Everyone remembers Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata, but the man whose assassination ignited the Mexican Revolution into a bloody inferno often fades into the periphery. Francisco Madero, a slight, spiritual idealist, was supposed to usher in a new era for Mexico. Instead, his presidency became a prelude to an even greater tragedy. His story isn't just about a single bullet, but the unraveling of a nation in what became known as La Decena Tragica, the 10 Tragic Days. A period of brutal betrayal, political maneuverings, and a conspiracy that would forever scar the soul of Mexico. For over 3 decades, Mexico had been under the iron fist of Porfirio Díaz. An aging general, he had brought a semblance of order and economic growth, but at a crushing cost: widespread poverty, political repression, and a deep-seated resentment simmering beneath the surface. Madero, from a wealthy Coahuila landowning family, was an unlikely revolutionary. He was a spiritualist, a vegetarian, and a believer in democratic ideals, a stark contrast to the hardened military men who dominated Mexican politics. His 1910 book, The Presidential Succession in 1910, openly criticized Díaz's authoritarian rule and called for free elections. It was a fuse lit in a powder keg. Díaz, confident in his control, initially dismissed Madero as an eccentric. But Madero's message resonated. When Díaz rigged the 1910 election, Madero declared it null and void, calling for an armed uprising on November 20th. This was the plan of San Luis Potosi, the official start of the Mexican Revolution. The rebellion spread like wildfire. Figures like Pancho Villa in the north and Emiliano Zapata in the south rose to prominence. Díaz, facing overwhelming opposition, resigned in May 1911 and fled to exile in France. Madero was hailed as a liberator. He won the subsequent election by a landslide, taking office in November 1911. The dream of a democratic Mexico, free from tyranny, seemed within reach, but the seeds of his destruction were already sown. Madero's idealism clashed with the brutal realities of Mexican politics. He struggled to appease the various revolutionary factions, many of whom felt he hadn't gone far enough to address land reform and social injustice. His greatest mistake, perhaps, was trusting the old guard. He retained many of Díaz's loyalists in key military positions, including the formidable General Victoriano Huerta, a man whose ambition was as vast as his cruelty. The stage was set for the 10 Tragic Days, which began on February 9, 1913. A group of conservative generals, led by Felix Díaz, Porfirio's nephew, and Bernardo Reyes, launched a coup in Mexico City. The rebels attacked the National Palace and the presidential residence. Madero, ever the idealist, placed his trust in Huerta, tasking him with quashing the rebellion, a decision that would prove fatal. The ensuing 10 days were a living nightmare for Mexico City. Artillery shells rained down on the capital, turning streets into battlegrounds. Civilians huddled in fear as the city became a stage for a bloody power struggle. Huerta, ostensibly defending Madero, was in fact playing a double game. He secretly negotiated with the rebel generals and the U.S. ambassador, Henry Lane Wilson, a man openly hostile to Madero. Wilson, representing American business interests threatened by Madero's reforms, actively encouraged the coup. He saw Madero as weak and unstable, a threat to American investments in oil and land. On February 18th, the betrayal was complete. Huerta arrested Madero and his vice president, José María Pino Suárez, at the National Palace. The Pact of the Embassy was signed, formalizing Huerta's takeover with U.S. backing. Madero, still believing he could negotiate, was held captive. He refused to resign, even under duress. His brother, Gustavo Madero, was brutally murdered by Huerta's men the same day, a chilling warning. 4 days later, on the night of February 22, 1913, the inevitable occurred. Madero and Pino Suárez were transferred from the National Palace to the Lecumberri prison. As they approached the prison, the car stopped. Accounts vary, but the official story was that they were killed in an attempted escape. The truth, however, was far more sinister. Madero and Pino Suarez were executed by firing squad, almost certainly on Huerta's orders. Their bodies were found riddled with bullets. The dream of a democratic Mexico had been extinguished in a hail of gunfire. Huerta immediately seized power, establishing a brutal dictatorship. But Madero's death, rather than ending the revolution, ignited it anew with even greater fury. The various factions, united in their hatred of Huerta, took up arms. The assassination of Madero transformed the Mexican Revolution from a struggle against Diaz into a multi-sided civil war, claiming millions of lives over the next decade. His tragic end stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of democracy and the enduring power of ambition and betrayal. The 10 tragic days serve as a bloody birth canal for modern Mexico, a crucible where the nation's identity was forged in fire and treachery. A period where ideals met their brutal end, only to be reborn through immense sacrifice. Next, we'll delve into the mysterious death of Pancho Villa and the whispers that follow his ghost.